They didn't even lower their voices. I was standing in the hallway, folding my granddaughter Emma's pajamas, a little yellow ones with the fading bumblebee print, when the words floated through the open kitchen door. "Don't bring her, she'll slow us down." That's what Alice said, my daughter-in-law. The air shifted in that moment, turned dense, cold, like I had stepped into the middle of an unexpected storm. I stayed perfectly still, pajama top limp in my hands, the scent of lavender dryer sheets rising in quiet puffs as if mocking the sudden ache in my chest. They didn't know I was listening, or maybe they didn't care. "You know how she is," Alice continued, her voice light as if she were discussing dinner reservations. "She won't keep up with the excursions. It'll just make everything more complicated." I didn't hear my son say anything in response, not even a breath of protest, just the soft clink of a coffee cup on marble, the shuffle of sneakers against tile, agreement in silence. 3 weeks ago, when they told me about the cruise, a big family adventure, something the kids will always remember, I had smiled so big my cheeks ached. I paid my deposit the same day, picked a mid-tier suite with a small balcony, and offered to chip in for the adjoining room so I could be near the children. Alice waved me off with one of those tight, overly polite smiles she saves for situations where she doesn't want to say no directly. "Just your company is enough, Mary," she said. Apparently, it wasn't. I stood there, fingers tightening around the soft cotton of Emma's pajamas, my vision blurred, and not with tears, not yet, but with a kind of stunned clarity, a clarity that saw the difference between being invited and being accommodated, between inclusion and obligation. I wasn't supposed to hear those words, but maybe I was always meant to understand them. The rest of that morning moved in slow, muted loops. I helped Noah find his swim trunks, showed Emma how to charge her tablet, I even offered to make lunch, and Alice, ever gracious, accepted with a distracted nod, her eyes on her phone. I was useful again, temporarily, but usefulness isn't the same as being wanted. Later that night, after they'd all gone to bed, I sat at the kitchen table, a half glass of bourbon in front of me and the cruise confirmation folded neatly at my elbow. The house was quiet in that eerie way that only happens when your heart's beating too loud to ignore. It had been years since I touched that bottle. I only pulled it out because I needed to remember how courage tasted, not the loud kind, not the kind that throws plates or storms out the door. No, this was the kind of courage that sits very still, breathes deeply, and decides it's done asking for a seat. I looked at the printed itinerary and my name typed neatly beside theirs and saw, for the first time, that I was never meant to be part of it, not truly. I reached for the phone with hands that had once held feverish babies and burned fingers on 1,000 buy tins, hands that raised a boy through lost jobs and scraped knees and one heart-wrenching middle school science fair where we stayed up all night building a volcano that wouldn't erupt. I dialed the cruise line, Royal Horizon line. "How can I help you?" "I'd like to change my reservation." "Certainly, ma'am. What would you like to do?" "Cancel my current booking, and upgrade me to the most private suite you have." A pause, then the voice, "Careful, that would be our presidential suite. It comes with a private terrace, personal concierge, and priority access TOA." "I'll take it, ma'am. It's a broken bar, significantly more expensive." I didn't blink. I'm 78 years old. I've been stretching pennies and saving receipts since Nixon resigned. "I'll take it." Another pause, a quiet shuffle of keystrokes. "All right then, you'll be assigned suite 1201, presidential class, early boarding. Is there anything else I can assist you with?" "No," I said, settling back into my chair, "that's all." When I hung up, the silence returned, but it no longer felt suffocating. It felt earned. I had always asked for space, asked for time, asked to be remembered, and slowly, quietly, they had offered me less and less, but now, I'd taken something, not from Thamo but for me. 2 days before departure, Alice sent me a chipper little text, filled with emojis and exclamation marks. "So excited for the trip, weather looks amazing, so glad we had that time with you this weekend." I didn't reply. Instead, I went to the hallway closet and pulled out my goods suitcase. The one with the soft lining and the smooth wheels. I hadn't used it since Charles died. It still smelled faintly of the rosemary sachets I used to pack between blouses. I folded 2 sundresses, 1 navy jumpsuit, and a pair of walking sandals. Then, with hands both reverent and steady, I reached for his Panama hata, the one he wore on our honeymoon in Key West. It was sun-faded and creased, but still proud. I tucked it on top, just in case he wanted to come with me, and that night, I slept with the kind of quiet that only comes when you've chosen yourself for the first time in decades. The thing about being sidelined, I say, it doesn't happen with fanfare. It's not an argument, not a slammed door. It's quieter than that, like standing outside a room you used to be welcome in, and realizing the conversation no longer pauses when you walk in. It happened, for me, on a Tuesday morning, the week before the cruise. Nothing special about the day itself, just the usual motions. I was in the kitchen, peeling apples for a crumble I promised the kids. Emma loves hers with extra cinnamon, and Noah, as always, pretends not to like sweets but sneaks a second serving when no one's looking. The window above the sink was open, warm breeze drifting through, carrying that early summer scent of cut grass and distant grills. For a moment, everything felt familiar. Alice was at the table with her laptop open, scrolling through what I assumed was the cruise itinerary. She had a glass of cucumber water beside her, beads of condensation sliding down like tears too proud to fall. I reached into the fridge and called over, casually, "Should I pick up more sunscreen for the kids? I noticed Emma's almost out." Alice didn't look up. "Oh, we already took care of that," she said, tapping at her keyboard. "Thanks though." It was a small thing, a tiny, polite deflection, but I felt it, all the same, that quiet redirection. Like I'd offered help in a language no one understood anymore. I wiped my hands on a dish towel and returned to the counter, slicing another apple, and Noah's floaties. "I think one's got a leak. I can patch it up." Alice's fingers paused on the keys for half a second. "We actually ordered new ones. They should arrive tomorrow. We've got most of the prep handled." "Mary, really, you don't need to worry." There it was again. Mary, not Mom. Not Grandma, just Mary, like a kindly neighbor, a well-meaning stranger. I stirred the bowl slowly, watched sugar coat the apple slices, imagined myself dissolving right into that mix, sweet, familiar, and entirely taken for granted. My son, Daniel, walked in just then, gym bag slung over one shoulder, phone pressed to his ear. "Yeah, babe, I'm grabbing it now," he said to whoever was on the other end. "Tell Mom I'll call her later." He wasn't talking about me. He paused long enough to peck Alice on the temple, muttered a distracted "Hey, Ma," in my direction, and walked back out. That was the thing. I wasn't hurt by malice. There wasn't any. It was absence wrapped in routine. When did I stop being the person they checked with, the one who knew where the passports were, who packed the snacks, who held everyone's itinerary in a plastic folder? I used to be the anchor, now I was ballast. I set the apple crumble in the oven and stood there, alone with the hum of the fridge and the tick of the wall clock. A soft wind rustled the lace curtains, and for a second I could almost see my reflection in the window glass, just the outline of an older woman in a borrowed kitchen. "Hey, Mary," Alice's voice broke the silence. "Do you mind taking the kids for a walk later? I'm behind on emails." "Of course," I replied, turning with a smile, and I meant it, but inside, something shifted. They didn't ask me to join the planning, they didn't ask what I needed. I was the extra hand, the errand runner, the fill-in, not cruelly, not intentionally, but thoroughly. That night, I heard them in the next room, talking about spa reservations and wine tastings. "Mom won't want to do the hot springs," Alice said lightly. "Too much walking," Danielle agreed. I stood outside their door, holding a stack of folded towels, invisible. I didn't knock, just turned and went back to the guest room, sat on the edge of the bed and stared at my open suitcase. It still held the dress I'd planned to wear for the family dinner on the cruise, a soft blue number with buttons down the front. I bought it on sale in April, hadn't worn it yet. I reached for the Panama hat I kept near the top, my husband's. and I sat with it for a while, letting my fingers trace the worn edges, the bend in the brim where he used to pinch it. He would have said something about all of this. He would have noticed the way I was being slowly repositioned, turned from participant to placeholder, but I hadn't said anything yet, not out loud, because it wasn't betrayal, not exactly. It was something more slippery, a slow forgetting. I was still useful, but not present, included, but not considered, and in that silencia between the polite nods and the folded towels I began to understand what they wouldn't say. I was invited, yes, but I was not meant to come. You don't realize it's happening at first, not when it's slow, not when it's wrapped in manners and smiles and we really appreciate use. It starts with the small things, a breakfast without your seat set, a conversation where your question floats unanswered, a laugh that doesn't include you. I noticed it one morning over oatmeal. I had set the table, as I always did, 4 bowls, 4 spoons, Emma's napkin folded into a triangle the way she liked, the box of raisins near Noah's spot, cinnamon sugar in the little blue dish I brought from my old kitchen. The kettle was just starting to whistle when Alice walked in. She paused, then blinked, surprised. "Oh, Mary, we were just going to grab something on the way. School drop-offs early today." Daniel came down a minute later, already halfway through a granola bar, earbuds in. He kissed Alice's cheek, muttered something about traffic, and turned to me briefly. "Thanks, Ma, you didn't have to do all that." They walked out the door, coats swinging, keys jingling, their children trailing behind in practiced chaos. I stood there with the table still set, steam rising from 4 untouched bowls. Didn't have to. The words stuck in my teeth, the door shut behind them, and the house fell silent again. Not a peaceful silence, a leftover one, like crumbs on a plate no one planned to finish. I sat down and ate one of the bowls myself, slowly, chewing past the tightness in my throat. I didn't clear the others right away, something in me couldn't yet, as if maybe they'd come back in, laughing, and sit, as if this was all just a mistake, but they didn't, and it wasn't. Later that afternoon, I found the grocery list on the counter. Alice had scribbled it quickly: almond milk, granola, sliced turkey, bubble bath. I used to be the one who wrote those lists. Now I was the one who picked them up, without being asked, not because I was told to, but because not doing it would make things harder for everyone, because that's what mothers do, what grandmothers become, invisible helpers. I put on my walking shoes, pulled the keys from the hook, and left. At the store, I passed the bakery section. Lemon bars were on sale. I thought of buying a box. I even picked it up, but then I remembered, Noah said once that sugar made him too sleepy, and Alice preferred whole food sweets. I placed the package back on the shelf. In aisle 5, I stood for too long, staring at a box of tea I hadn't had since Charles passed. Earl Grey, with orange peel. He used to drink it at night. 1 cube of sugar, no milk. No one in the house drank tea anymore, just oat milk lattes and protein smoothies. Still, I bought the box. Back home, I unpacked the groceries, put everything away exactly where Alice liked it, the fridge organized, the snacks sorted, the labels facing forward. Then I put on the kettle and steeped a cup of that tea. I sat at the table with it, cradling the warmth, and for the first time in weeks, I remembered what it felt like to sit without expectation, to taste something for myself. The front door opened just as I took the first sip. Emma came running in, holding a crumpled drawing. "Grandma, I drew you something." I smiled, genuinely. "For me? Huh, it's us on the boat." She pointed to 2 stick figures, one tall, one shorter, both wearing sunglasses, one with a hat. "Who's this?" I asked. She beamed. "You and Mommy, but you're on the beach and Mommy's in the pool." I nodded, tracing the lines of the sand, the little squiggles of water. That night, after dinner which I cooked and which was eaten without comment, I rinsed the dishes and loaded the dishwasher. Alice was on the phone in the next room, laughing. Daniel was scrolling through sports scores. The kids had disappeared upstairs. No one asked how my day was. No one noticed the grocery bags I'd carried in. No one saw the tea box sitting quietly on the shelf, next to their turmeric powder and imported honey. I went to bed early, lay in the guest room, the one that used to be called the sunroom before they needed space for the home office upstairs. The bed was comfortable enough, but the sheets smelled faintly of storage. I stared at the ceiling fan spinning slowly and tried to remember the last time someone asked me what I wanted. Not needed, wanted. The next morning, I woke early. My body always wakes before the sun now. Old habits. I sat in the living room, cup of Earl Grey in hand, and looked around. The photo frames on the shelf were all recent. The kids, Alice and Daniel at some gala, a beach shot from last summer. None had me in them. The only one with my face was a school photo from when I taught 3rd grade. A younger me, full cheeks, bright eyes. I looked at that woman, wondered if she'd have been invited on this trip. Then I opened the small drawer beneath the side table and took out a notepad. I used to write grocery lists on it, appointments, reminders for medication refills. Today I wrote a different kind of list, not of what I needed, but of what I missed. The memory came to me with the smell of brown sugar and butter. I hadn't meant to make cookies. I'd opened the cupboard looking for the tea tin, but my hand landed on the old recipe box instead of green tin, faded roses. My fingers brushed the lid as if it were skin. It made that soft metallic click I hadn't heard in years. Inside, still in my handwriting, was the lemon bar recipe, Charles's favorite, and Daniel's too, when he was little. I hadn't made them since Emma was in preschool. The kitchen was still quiet, no one had asked for anything. The clock on the microwave blinked 6:42, too early for errands, too late to go back to bed, so I baked. I mixed the dough slowly, letting the rhythm of it guide my hands of flour, sugar, salt, zest from the one lemon I had left. I pressed the base into the old glass pan I always used, the one with the chip in the corner. It still baked just fine. As the bars cooled on the counter, that's when it came unexpected, like warmth from a forgotten blanket. We were still living in the blue house then, the one with the crooked fence and the lilac bush that bloomed too early every year. Daniel was 9, maybe 10, a scrawny thing with scraped knees and a gap between his front teeth. I owned a small bakery on Broad Street, a Mary's Morning we called it. Just me and one part-time girl from the high school. I'd open at 4:30 a.m., roll out the dough while it was still dark. By 7, we had coffee brewing and the scent of cinnamon rolls drifting onto the sidewalk. Daniel used to come by after school, dragging his backpack behind him like a tired dog. He'd sit on the stool near the back and swipe lemon bars when he thought I wasn't looking. "You'll get me fired," I'd tease, wiping flour off my hands. "You own the place," he'd say, grinning with a mouthful of sugar. One afternoon, he brought a card with him, folded construction paper, crayon too hard. It said "Number 1 Baker Mom" and had a drawing of a lopsided pie and a stick figure with a chef's hat. I kept that card in the register drawer until the bakery closed. Even now, I think about that day not because it was extraordinary, but because it was ordinary, and I was seen in it. Not just needed, known. The smell of lemon and butter brought me back. I cut a square and placed it gently on a plate. No one else was awake. No one had asked for them, but for a moment, the kitchen was mine again. I stood at the sink and looked out the window. The yard was trimmed. The flower beds Alice planted last spring were neat, symmetrical, a little too perfect. I missed the wildness of my own backyard, the way daisies used to creep into the grass. How the peonies always leaned too far to the left. Back then, the house was messy, life was messy, but it was full. Daniel used to sit on the porch steps beside me, chewing sunflower seeds and asking questions about the moon. "Why does it follow us?" he asked once, when we were walking home in the evening. "It doesn't," I said, squeezing his hand. "You just finally have time to notice it." I rinsed the plate, even though I hadn't eaten the lemon bar. I placed it in a tin with wax paper between the layers and left it on the kitchen island with a note, "If anyone's hungry." I didn't sign it. No one commented on it later that day, but by dinner, the tin was half empty. I smiled to myself, not because I was thanked, I wasn't, but because I remembered. I remembered the bakery, the sticky counters, the tired mornings, the card in the register. I remembered the sound of my name said with love, and that memory, however small, held me together a little longer. Hope is a strange thing. It doesn't arrive like a sunrisey grand and certain. It creeps in like a breeze under the door, uninvited, slight, and in my case, unwise. It happened the night before the cruise. I was sitting in the living room, alone, folding the laundry that no one had asked me to do. The children had already gone to bed, their bedtime story traded for glowing screens and tangled earbuds. Alice and Daniel were in the kitchen, hushed voices and clinking glasses, the sounds of a marriage maintaining itself. I wasn't listening truly. I wasn't, but I could hear enough to understand they were talking about the trip, the itinerary, the excursions, who would watch Noah on the snorkeling tour if Emma got too tired. Then I heard my name, barely, just a breath of it. Maybe we should just let her come, Alice said, softly, as though my presence were an act of mercy. Daniel didn't respond at first, then came his answer, a shrug in his voice. She already said she was staying behind, and then, it's probably for the best. I froze mid-fold, Noah's Spider-Man socks in my hand. That was it, probably for the best. They didn't sound cruel, they weren't laughing, they weren't whispering behind my back. It was worse than that, they sounded settled, final. They already rearranged the plans without me, slotted the days neatly into a version that didn't include my pace, my questions, my company. I set the socks down and stared at the laundry basket. Everything inside it smelled faintly of lavender and starch, clean, ordered, like a life that didn't need remainders. But just hours before, I had allowed myself to hope. Earlier that evening, Emma had come into the guest room in my room, if you could still call it that. She was barefoot, cheeks flushed from brushing her teeth, her long hair damp and sticking to her neck. "Grandma," she whispered, "are you sure you're not coming?" I looked up from my suitcase already packed, zipped, waiting in the back of my closet. "I thought it was just going to be your parents and you," I said gently. "Besides, someone has to watch the house." She frowned, climbing up beside me on the bed. "But it won't be the same without you." I smiled, not too big, not to betray how much that meant, just enough to tuck it away. "You'll have so much fun," I said. "And I want to hear all about it when you come back." She nodded, still unconvinced, then reached over and touched the necklace I was wearing, a small silver pendant, nothing fancy. "Charles gave it to me for our 25th anniversary." She didn't know that, but she traced it with her finger anyway, like it meant something. "I wish you were coming," she said, and then she was gone, just like that, off to bed, skipping down the hallway like only a child can skip, with the confidence that the people you love will always be there, always watching, always waiting. And for a minute, I believed her. I believed that maybe, just maybe, someone would knock on my door that night, cup of tea in hand, saying, "We were wrong, we want you there," but no one knocked. Later, when I returned to the kitchen to pour myself a glass of water, the tin of lemon bars was gone, the note had been tossed, the counter was clean, as if I had never baked anything at all. No one mentioned them, no one asked. I stood at the sink, sipping water, the lights overhead humming with that faint flicker they always made after too many hours. Alice passed by, murmured good night, without looking up from her phone. Daniel nodded at me on his way upstairs. I said nothing, but inside, the little flicker of hope I'd foolishly entertained dimmed, not suddenly, not cruelly, just faded, like the last candle at a party no one stayed for. That night, I lay in bed, wide awake. I kept thinking about the phrase, "probably for the best." What does that mean, really? It means they believe the world will turn smoother without me in it, that their trip, their laughter, their photos, will be more enjoyable if I remain offstage. It wasn't anger that filled me, it wasn't even sorrow, it was something quieter, something still, like standing in an empty room you used to decorate for birthdays, and realizing no one remembers the color of the walls you painted. In the morning, I woke before anyone else, made coffee just for me and drank it in the silence. Then I took out my suitcase, and reached for the Panama hat. We were still going, they just didn't know it. I don't know when I stopped being someone they saw, not when I became old. That part came slowly, in the mirror, in my joints, in the way cashiers started calling me ma'am with too much softness, but the invisibility of it came faster, all at once, and over years, like turning the pages of a book and realizing your name isn't written in it anymore. I sat on the edge of the bed that final evening and looked around the room they gave me, a guest room, they called it, but it felt more like a waiting room, the kind with careful throws and a lamp too dim to read by. I had a drawer for my nightgown, a hook for my cardigan, nothing else. None of the children's drawings hung here, no wedding photo, no framed memory that included me. It was tidy and temporary. I reached for the suitcase in the closet, not to open it, just to rest my hand on the handle. Even that felt heavy. I wasn't angry. I thought I might be, but I wasn't. I was just a broken bar, emptied, used up like a candle that still flickers but gives no heat. I'd given everything over the years, my hands, my back, my time, held fevers to my chest, baked through grief, paid bills with the money I didn't speak about, smiled when they called late, smiled when they didn't call at all, and now I was a chair they didn't want to carry on the cruise, one too many, one too fragile. They didn't say it outright, of course, they never did. They said, "We thought you'd want to stay home." They said, "It's just easier with the kids." They said, "You'd be more comfortable here, where the blinds are always half closed, where no one knocks unless the Wi-Fi is broken or the dog needs letting out." I remember a time when I used to be the first person they ran to, when tears meant arms, not inconvenience. Now, my presence is a question mark at the end of a text. Are you okay? Not sent to know, sent to check a box. I went to the bathroom, washed my face, stared into the mirror. It's strange how grief shows up not as tears but as stillness. I hadn't cried in weeks, not because I didn't want to, but because it felt like there was no point. Tears used to mean someone would come and say, "What's wrong?" Now, they just mean I was overreacting. "We're doing our best, Mom." That's what Daniel would say, not cruelly, not dismissively, just with that tired, practiced tone he uses when he's already decided the answer. And maybe they were doing their best, but I wasn't in it. Earlier that day, I overheard Alice tell Emma she'd be in charge of Grandma's plants while they were gone. Emma asked, "Why can't Grandma come?" Alice laughed lightly, "Because she needs rest." I wanted to tell them, "I'm not tired from age, I'm tired from being unseen," but I said nothing, because what do you say when even your silence isn't noticed? That night, I didn't make tea, didn't lay out my clothes. I sat in the guest chair, lights off, hands folded in my lap like I was waiting to be called into something that would never come. I thought of Charles, how he used to say my name like it mattered, just Mary, nothing more. He once told me that I held the world together with my steadiness, but what happens when the world stops noticing the hands that hold it? In that room, on that quiet night, I felt the full ache of being afterthoughted, not rejected. That would imply intensity, energy. This was absence. This was depletion. This was walking through your own life like a familiar museum, knowing you once painted the walls but now you're only allowed to dust the shelves. Eventually, I stood, brushed my teeth, folded the cardigan I hadn't worn all week because it didn't match Alice's living room, and I placed it gently into my suitcase. I laid the Panama hat on top, and I whispered it not aloud, not even to the room, just to myself, in the smallest place inside me that still remembered who I was. No one's coming to save you, so you save yourself. And just like that, something softened, not like a triumph, more like surrender, not to them, not to being forgotten, but to something else entirely, choice, because when the world stops seeing you, sometimes the only light left is the one you carry out the door. I didn't sleep that night, not from restlessness, not from anger, I simply stayed awake because I'd run out of reasons to sleep. The hours passed quietly, the house was still, outside, the wind tickled the siding just enough to remind me the world was moving, always moving, even when I wasn't part of it. I sat by the window in the guest room, wrapped in the old cardigan no one ever sees me in, the one with the loosened hem and the little coffee stain on the cuff. I used to wear it on Sundays, when Charles and I would take the long way to the market just to talk. I wore it now because I needed something that still remembered me. The streetlight cast a pale cone of yellow across the driveway. Their suitcases were already in the van, labeled, zipped, waiting. Everything about this trip was arranged, confirmed, coordinated, except me. Even now, they hadn't checked in, not even a knock on my door to say goodnight, not even a casual, "We'll miss you," because they wouldn't, not really. I was the cat sitter, the fern waterer, the just-in-case backup if someone forgot a charger or needed someone to sign for a package. They didn't hate me, they'd simply stopped needing me to exist, and in that knowing, something settled in my chest, a not heavy, not sharp, just a broken bar certain. I didn't belong here anymore, not in this version of family, not in this soft corner of convenience where my presence was only useful if silent. There's a strange kind of relief that comes with clarity, even if it hurts. It's like stepping out of a fog and finally seeing the shape of the thing you've been feeling for years, and the shape is this. I am not central anymore, I am not remembered, not asked, not considered, and I can either keep folding myself smaller, tighter, quieter, or I can stop. I can stop waiting for them to remember the woman who used to make cinnamon rolls on birthdays, who used to tape drawings to the fridge with magnets shaped like ducks, who taught Daniel how to iron his first shirt and cried when he got his first job and sent his first rent check with too many zeros. They don't remember her, not because they're cruel, but because they don't have to, because I never asked to be remembered. I only gave, and gave, and gave, until there was nothing left but an outline of service. I looked down at my hands, veined, thin-skinned, a little dry from the dish soap I still use because Alice prefers the scent of Citrus Grove. They used to hold babies, bake pies, type letters for a man who didn't believe women belonged in the office but kept me there anyway because I was faster than the secretaries. They used to hold babies, bake pies, type letters for a man who didn't believe women belonged in the office but kept me there anyway because I was faster than the secretaries. They used to wipe tears and press quarters into palms and brush back sweaty bangs during fevers, and now they set tables no one eats from, fold laundry no one thanks me for, write checks no one asks permission to deposit, and that's when the thought arrived, a simple, clean, absolute. This is not how I end. I didn't jump up, didn't pack, didn't book anything. I just sat there, sat with the knowing, with the truth. I didn't need to be rescued. I didn't even need to be missed. I just needed to stop shrinking. I needed to stop living as a placeholder in someone else's plan, because I still had things to see, to feel, to taste, laughter that didn't come from the next room, joy that didn't need permission, silence that didn't feel like erasure. The clock blinked 4:17. In the hallway, a floorboard creaked, the dog shifted in its sleep. The world didn't know yet, but I did. I would not stay behind, not again, not for them, not for their comfort, not even for the peace I thought I owed them. Tomorrow, they would leave, and so would I. I woke before the sun, no alarm, just instinct, the kind of instinct that once told me when a baby was about to cry or when the oven timer was about to chime. It's a different instinct now, a quieter, but sharper. It told me today was the day. Today, I would no longer wait to be considered. Today, I would consider myself. The house was still asleep. Emma's door was closed, her nightlight casting soft animal-shaped glows beneath the gap. Daniel's voice came faintly through the vent, murmuring in his sleep the way he used to as a boy. Alice's laptop was still open on the kitchen counter, screen dimmed but not shut down. I moved silently, careful not to wake anyone, not because I was afraid, but because this moment wasn't about them, it was about me. I walked to the guest room closet and pulled out my suitcase, the Goodonia, the one with leather corners and a navy lining that still carried the scent of cedar and old perfume. I laid it on the bed, unzipped it, and breathed in. Inside was everything I needed: 2 dresses, 1 cardigan, my walking shoes, a small jewelry case with nothing expensive but everything important, and on top, the Panama hat, Charles's. He wore it the summer we drove Route 66 in a rented convertible. He tilted it just so to keep the sun out of his eyes. I teased him about looking like a retired detective. He wore it anyway, proudly. I picked it up, ran my fingers along the worn brim, and placed it carefully on the nightstand. Then, with steady hands, I reached for the small drawer beneath the bed and pulled out a folder. Inside was my cruise reservation, but not the one they knew about. Number. This one had a different suite number, presidential, booked 3 days ago. In the stillness of a midnight decision, I had called the cruise line, asked what was available, and when they hesitated about the cost, I didn't blink. I raised a son on minimum wage. I told the woman on the phone, paid off a mortgage, ran a bakery, buried a husband. I think I can afford a room with a view. She laughed. That you can, Ms. L. That you can. Now, I held the papers like a secret and a promise all at once. I slipped them into my travel bag, checked the time, 5:12. They wouldn't be up for another hour, and that's when I did it. Not loudly, not defiantly, just a broken bar finally. I rolled the suitcase to the front door, slipped on my shoes, took one last look at the living room and the shelves where my picture used to sit, now replaced by curated minimalism. The couch I wasn't invited to sit on during movie night, the fridge that held almond milk but not cream, the space I had carved myself into so they wouldn't have to bend, and then, I left. I didn't leave a note. They'd assume I stayed behind, as planned. Let them wave at the dock without looking for me, let them board, check the manifest, and never notice the name listed 3 decks above their own. Let them wonder, because this wasn't about being seen by them, this was about being seen by me. The cab driver didn't ask questions, just helped me with my suitcase and turned up the heater when he noticed my cardigan sleeves pulled over my hands. We drove in silence as the sky turned lavender with morning. At the port, I stepped out and approached the check-in line meant for upper deck passengers. There was a velvet rope and a staff member with a clipboard. Name? She asked, without looking up. L. Mary L. She scanned the list, paused, then looked up with a smile. Presidential suite. Welcome aboard, Miss L. She held the rope aside and gestured for me to pass through. I nodded once, and stepped forward. On board, the elevator opened to polished floors, soft lighting, and a corridor so quiet I could hear the distant hush of the sea pressing against the hull. Suite 1201, the key slid into the lock like it had been waiting. Inside, the room opened like a breath I'd been holding since Charles died. Floor-to-ceiling windows, fresh orchids on the sideboard, a private terrace with a view of nothing but ocean and possibility. I didn't weep, I didn't speak, I just walked to the glass doors, opened them wide, and stepped barefoot onto the deck. The wind kissed my face, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like a shadow. I felt whole. Back inside, I hung the Panama hat on a brass hook near the door, then I poured a glass of water, walked to the terrace, and whispered, "We made it, love," not because he'd booked it, but because I had. The first day passed like a dream, whispered rather than spoken. I spent it wandering the edges of my own breath. No rushing, no questions, no one calling from the next room, just me, the hush of ocean air, and the sound of my own footsteps echoing gently against polished marble. The presidential suite was not ostentatious, it was elegant in a way that didn't beg for approval. Muted tones, cool light, a vase of fresh white lilies near the bed. Someone had placed a bowl of ripe fruit by the window. No one told me to be grateful, no one needed to. It wasn't about the room, it was about choosing it. The balcony doors stayed open that evening, salt-kissed breeze curling through the space like a promise. I wrapped myself in a linen robe that still smelled of lavender, poured a glass of sparkling water, and sat on the terrace, legs tucked beneath me, watching the horizon forget the sun. And for the first time in years, I felt a broken bar equal to the silence, not a guest in it, not waiting to be invited into someone else's day, just here. The ship had been sailing for hours when I heard the familiar tones of children on the deck below. Emma's laugh, unmistakably bright and tumbling, Noah's voice, half a complaint, half curiosity. I looked down over the railing, slowly, careful not to let my shadow catch the light. There they were, Alice adjusting the straps on Emma's sandals, Daniel fumbling with the pool passes. They looked tired already, wrinkled from the flight, trying too hard to look casual. Their cabin door swung open behind them, a small, square, no view, cramped with luggage, floaties, and the high-pitched tension of family logistics. They didn't look up, didn't scan the ship for me. They hadn't expected to. I pulled back from the rail, not out of fear, just out of choice. They didn't need to know I was here. This wasn't for them. The next morning, I did something I hadn't done in decades. I sat down and wrote a postcard, not an email, not a text, an actual postcard, the kind you buy in the gift shop with a watercolor of the ship on the front and the words "Wish you were here" in looping, absurd font. I chose it anyway. I sat at the suite's small writing desk, pen in hand, and wrote with care, to Emma, "Sweetheart, if they don't save you a seat, buy your own ticket. You'll see things they never imagined. Love, Grandma." I didn't add an address, didn't plan to mail it. Instead, I tucked it into the Panama hat, now resting quietly on the sideboard, its brim curved like a knowing smile. It would stay there, a whisper tucked in felt and thread, a letter to the next woman in the family who might someday feel what I'd felt. A reminder that there is always a door you can open yourself. Before breakfast, I took one last walk through the suite, slid my hand across the cool marble counter, straightened the edge of the comforter, looked once more at the sky through the giant windows. Then I opened the small safe. Inside was a photo, just one, me and Charles, summer of '82. I was wearing a blue blouse, flower on my cheek, and he had his arm wrapped around my waist like he was never letting go. I took the photo, walked out to the balcony, and clipped it to the rail with a small magnetic pin I'd brought from home, a quiet flag, not for the world, for me, proof that I'd existed fully, loved fully, laughed until my ribs hurt, danced barefoot in grocery store aisles, and now I booked the best room on the ship without asking permission. Then, I returned inside, and for the first time in as long as I could remember, a broken bar. I locked the door behind me, not to keep anyone out, but to keep me in, to tell the room, the wind, the ghost of every waiting dinner and unacknowledged favor. I'm not on hold anymore. I woke early on the final morning, before the ship had even begun to slow. The air was different, still salty, but quieter now. The wind had stilled, and the horizon stretched soft and pale like pressed linen. We were nearing port, nearing the end, but it didn't feel like an ending, not for me. I rose without hurry, made a cup of tea, Earl Grey, 1 sugar, no milk, and carried it to the balcony where the morning was waiting. I sat with it in both hands, watching the shoreline bloom in the distance, little rooftops, church spires, the slow return of land after so many days of sea, and I smiled, not because I was going home, but because I had already arrived. I hadn't spoken to them, not once, no glances across the pool deck, no hallway fancy seeing you here, not even when I saw Alice checking her phone on the upper lounge, perhaps wondering why I hadn't texted to say goodbye. I hadn't left a note, hadn't asked where they'd parked the car. They thought I stayed home, fed the cat, watered the plants, waited, and maybe that was better. Let them think I was where they left me. I didn't need them to know I was here. This wasn't about proof, it was about presence, and this suit, this voyage, this quiet wind against my skin was mine, fully mine. When the final call came, a disembarkation for upper-level suite, I stood slowly, rolled my suitcase to the door, placed the Panama hat atop it with both hands, a kind of gentle ceremony. I paused only once, to slip the postcard out of the hat, fold it in half, and place it inside the small guest book they left on the writing desk. A message to no one, a message to anyone: if they forget you, remember yourself. The hallway was quiet, carpeted, the kind that muffles every step so no one hears you leave. I walked slowly, not like someone escaping, like someone finishing a dance, At the end of the dock, a steward lifted my suitcase into a black town car, nodded politely, and closed the door behind me. The city rolled by a soft gray, early shops opening, taxis darting between buses. I didn't miss them. Not Daniel's distracted smile, not Alice's cool politeness, not even the children, who I loved more than breath, because this wasn't about being angry, it was about being full, and for once, I was. The driver asked where I'd like to be dropped. I gave him an address he didn't expect. Not home, a small cafe copyright on the edge of the city, one with iron tables, chipped saucers, and a view of the harbor. Charles and I used to sit there on Sundays. I hadn't been in years, but today, it called to me. I sat alone at a window seat, ordered a pastry, a proper cappuccino, took out a notepad and wrote nothing in particular. No grocery lists, no reminders, just a thought. A life doesn't end when it's no longer convenient for others, it simply begins again, quieter and stronger. Outside, the sun stretched over the water like a blessing. Inside, I took a deep breath, and let the silence hold me, not like a punishment but like a song I finally remembered the words to.